topic because I think it's obviously really important. And there's plenty of women who have really significant side effects, and it's nice to know what can we do to help take care of this and help take care of your body during this phase of life.
Yeah.
First thing I'll do though is I just want to orient you to our company. A lot of you are familiar with our company because you've been patients here, or maybe know people who have been. And so this is Northwest Movement Company, or Northwest Mobile Physical Therapy is what we used to be, but Northwest Movement Company. And so Trey is the owner of the company and is a physical therapist as well, and started the company back in 2020. And so I'm a PT who works here, and then we have a care coordinator whose name is Amber, who works here in the mornings to help scheduling and insurance and things along those lines. So basically the motto of our company is to help people get ready for the things you want to do and then stay ready for those things. And I like to think of it as we want to take you out of the negative and help move you into the positive, not just leave you in a neutral place. So we want you to enjoy doing the things you love for the rest of your life. And so that really is definitely right along the lines of what we're talking about tonight with perimenopause and postmenopause, because that change in our bodies definitely can cause a limited ability to do things if we don't address it. So we'll be talking specifically about what to do soon, but I wanted to give you a little bit of a background why this kind of came up on my radar. And I think first of all is because obviously I'm a woman, and these are things that I'm kind of starting to deal with and going to deal with more as I age, and so that piqued my interest. But even more than that, about probably last fall, my mom got diagnosed with osteoporosis, and so just starting to look into a little bit more of like, what do we do about that? And my mom, she was going to be here tonight, so I'm surprised she's not here yet, but she comes and works out here at the gym. But she's something I really admire about her is she's a superhuman investigator and really started to delve into what does the research say about what to do to build your bone mass. And she found that a lot of the things that you can get prescribed medication-wise, you can't take long-term. So things like Fosamax, which is a really well-known medication, you can take for about 2 years, and then you have to take a break from it because it can cause some troublesome side effects. So those are some of the things that we learned that were like, oh, okay, maybe that's not a long-term answer. As she's doing her research, of course, we find out that weightlifting can help, and that is one of the things we'll talk about tonight. How should you do weightlifting? And so we started to work out together, partly because it's great to have an accountability partner when you're exercising, and she wanted to know what to be doing, and so we started working out together just to gain some strength and hopefully improve her muscle mass. And it got me thinking, how many other women don't know what to be doing during this time of life to help their bodies do as well as they can? And so that's why we're here tonight. And so we will get to those specific ways to be exercising soon. And again, what I think is really amazing about this is it doesn't have negative side effects. Like when we exercise our bodies, there's some really excellent research that shows really amazing responses for how your body can change with that, and we'll talk a little bit about why it's important. But it will, so I think it's just like a really exciting means of being able to do something for your body because it doesn't require medication or having to deal with negative side effects. And so knowing exactly what to do to help yourself is important. So we'll get to that pretty soon, but I wanted to hear a little bit from you guys first, after introducing us and myself. Who here has had symptoms related to menopause before? Okay. Well, we've got a resounding. Yes. Okay.
All of the above.
Yeah.
Am I the only one who hasn't?
Yeah.
I'm the only one who hasn't had them. Yeah, and obviously, they can be pretty troublesome, and they don't just a lot of times exist around the time that menopause is starting, right? But it can last for years post-menopause. And so, we'll talk a little bit about why you even have symptoms to start with. Does anybody here think that they're in perimenopause at all? That's definitely where I am. Yeah, okay. Yeah, we'll define what exactly that is soon, because I think there's a lot of questions like, what exactly is this? I didn't know a lot about it until I looked into it a little bit more. I'm like, oh, okay, that's why you have these symptoms. And so we'll go through that next, and then we'll get to what should we do about that. Anybody here regularly participating in exercise program? Awesome. You guys are already ahead of the game, which I love. And that's where I want to give you some pointers tonight. So some definitions. So menopause is actually just a day in your life. And it's the day that you've been exactly 1 year since your last bleeding cycle from your menstrual cycle. And so you're either perimenopause or you're postmenopause for the majority of this phase of your life. And so the typical time that menopause onsets is around 51, 52 years old. And of course that's variable, and that can, that definitely maybe earlier for some women or maybe a little later. And there are a lot of different things that affect that. Some of it is even your ethnicity, your genetics. But what's happening on a hormone level is the hormones that your ovaries make, which is estradiol, estrogen, and progesterone, basically flatline and they stop being produced. And I'll explain a little bit why that's a problem beyond just the negative or the unpleasant side effect or symptoms that you feel. And perimenopause is defined as a time when your hormones start to fluctuate. So that can be like a whole 10-year period where you're not getting that same amount of estrogen and progesterone as maybe you did when your cycle was very, very consistent. And so instead of having that consistency of, you'll maybe see your cycle start to change where you'll have them more frequently, but they might be more like heavy or more light in that bleeding time. But there's some change and the reason for that happening is because there's a decrease in the amount of ovulation. So as you start to decrease in your ovulation, what will happen is estrogen will surge high, and if you don't ovulate, your progesterone won't counteract that, and so you'll start to have side effects that are pretty uncomfortable. So this is typically between 41 and 51, but some people will have that sooner, like maybe in their later 30s in some cases. And for some women, they don't experience this for a very long period of time, so it just depends how often that will be. So to kind of clarify a little bit, like estrogen and progesterone, or estradiol estrogen is what we'll clarify, which are the type of hormones that your ovaries make. Do you guys know how they work in your body at all? Like ideas how they work? What was that?
Remind us.
Okay.
Well,
Yeah.
and then is there estriol?
Estriol, yes.
Okay.
We'll talk about that.
Okay.
Yes. That's
I just wondered.
You're right. Yeah, there's 3 types of estrogen.
Okay.
So estrase is a type of estrogen that your body produces while you're pregnant. And then estradiol is the typical like estrogen that your ovaries releases. And so what hormones do in your body is more than just, and I think what we associate estrogen and progesterone is really like with your menstrual cycle or maybe with pregnancy, and then of course menopause. And so they are messengers that communicate with almost every cell in your body actually. So they're pretty significant, and this is why you're feeling symptoms that you'll feel. They tell your muscles to grow, your bones to form, help you control your temperature, appetite, and your fat storage, and decrease inflammation. So they have a pretty wide spread effect on your whole system. So in postmenopause, and you're not creating those particular forms of estrogen and progesterone, you will still create estrogen, and that's what you mentioned, estriol. And actually the primary cells in your body that create estriol are your fat cells or adipose tissue. And so for some women, so for some women, you may still have elevated symptoms for quite a while after menopause because you are still creating this significant amount of estrogen and it's not opposed by progesterone. And so that can be the reason you'll have like hot flashes for a long period of time. Like my mom said that she had them for 15 years after menopause, pretty significantly, and it's pretty uncomfortable. So they will find that if you can do exercise that is focused on trying to help decrease, especially abdominal fat tissue, it will help decrease some of those symptoms. And so some of the things we'll talk about are going to be biased towards that effect. So you guys, many of you have experienced you're in menopause, postmenopause. It sounds like you've had some symptoms. What are the common symptoms, or what are the symptoms you've felt? Hot flashes, yes, that's kind of the classic, right?
Fatigue, insomnia.
Okay, yep. Yep, that lack of sleep is a really common one. Brain fog is another one I'll mention. Anything else you guys can think of?
Bladder issues.
Bladder issues, yep. Incontinence is a common time to have an increase in incontinence. And part of the reason for that is because the muscle mass changes affect your pelvic floor muscles. And also estrogen has a plumping effect on your vaginal tissue, and so it actually makes your tissue thicker, so it helps protect that urethra and helps keep urine in the bladder. So there's again some direct effects for some of those estrogen changes and muscle mass changes associated with that. There's weight gain, usually about an average of 5 to 8 pounds. And yeah, it's kind of frustrating, right?
0 to that.
Yeah. Part of that is because estrogen actually helps with decreasing water in your body, so it helps you excrete water, and so some of it's water weight, and also it helps with insulin sensitivity, and that's not just, we'll say, the way that insulin works in your body is that helps to get the sugars out of your blood and puts it into your cells. Well, what happens post-menopause is that it starts to take those sugars and puts them into your adipose tissue instead of your muscle tissue. And so that's why we start to see an increase in that adipose tissue versus muscle tissue. And so the good news is you can do something about that.
Yeah.
Which is where we're going next.
Oh, good.
Almost. We're going there soon. So what we'll talk about next are the physiological changes. So if they were to test your muscle mass or your bone mass, what those changes will be, how your hormones affect that. So there is a muscle mass decrease, and part of that's age related. So this happens for both men and women. So every decade after your 30s, we will start to lose about 8% of our muscle mass if you're not doing something like exercising. So thankfully you guys are all doing things, which is awesome. But that's one of the things we'll say, hey, just because of age, you could have a decrease in your muscle mass. But then they'll find, because of that decrease in estrogen and progesterone, now we can potentially have up to 30 to 60% loss of your muscle mass after menopause. So that's a significant amount. So you can expect that, hey, that's going to affect your strength and ability to do things. And like I mentioned earlier, there's body composition changes because of what your insulin is doing with the energy in your blood. It's putting it into your fat cells instead of your muscle cells, and so we'll see an increase in adipose or fat tissue and a decrease in that muscle tissue because of that. The other really interesting thing about estradiol estrogen, it helps your bone, or it helps your muscles be larger and bigger, but it also helps with the strength of contraction that you create. And so this is why we're realizing the way that you exercise, we may need to change the focus of that to really help your body start to do that by stimulating it in a different way, because your hormones aren't just naturally helping you do that. So then we've got bone mass reduction. So there's some women, and this is not true for every woman, but some women can lose up to 20% of bone mass within 5 to 7 years postmenopause. So it's pretty significant to think a third of your skeleton is lost because of the changes in your hormones. So, and that's because that estrogen that your ovaries makes assists with the cells that build your bone mass, and it also decreases the cells that break down your bones. And so it helps to regulate, and we'll talk about how your skeleton is remodeled. It will be changed out, like cells will get replaced. And so there's that happy medium that we like when you're building and having them removed versus just having them removed. And then the last thing is and this is probably not the last thing, but one of the other significant things is that there's an increase in inflammation in your system. And so, the estrogen works to help decrease the negative inflammation. And so things like gut dysfunction can increase because of that, and then maybe just an increased tendency towards like a tendonitis or joint pain because of that. And so obviously I'm painting kind of a really negative picture here and these are potentials. This doesn't mean that all of this is going to happen to every woman, right? But it helps to, I think, help us see the importance of doing something to help mitigate those changes and hopefully reverse some of those changes by what you're doing. So what can we do? That's where we're going. Now we're gonna go to the practical part of this presentation. So hopefully you'll leave tonight with some new ways to be exercising to hopefully help prevent these things. So one thing you can do, and you probably have heard about in the news recently more, is hormone replacement therapy. And I think what they're finding is that some of those studies that they did in the past weren't done as thoroughly as they should have been, and so they came out with really negative information for the use of hormone replacement therapy, that it was very dangerous. And I think what they're finding now is it's actually probably safe for most women to do that. Again, that's a decision, something I would recommend that you study to look into to determine if that's something you'd like to do. I'm not going to give you a recommendation on that, because you need to kind of know your family history and if there's any negative potentials for using or hormone replacement therapy. It is something that my mom found is really well supported for helping to stimulate bone mass, and maybe even more effective depending on the levels than something like Fosamax. But that, of course, is not my realm, so I'm not going to give you recommendations there. Exercise is my realm as a physical therapist. So what's really encouraging is that there's some really good evidence for exercise to help both manage symptoms associated with menopause, but also those physiological changes associated with menopause. As you'll probably know or think, that because I'm a physical therapist, any type of exercise I'm excited that anybody is doing, but if we know that there's a specific way to do it, it's important that you guys know what specifically to be doing when you exercise, so you can make the time and effort that you put forth in that way really count. All right, everybody ready? Ready for our things? We've got three things to focus on for exercise. So we're gonna talk about cardio, what you do for your cardiovascular system, how you weight lift, and then also what to do to stimulate bone mass building. What do you guys currently do for like cardio workouts?
I just walk.
Walk. Okay. Yeah, that's I think nice. I enjoy getting out, especially when it's sunny like today. Okay. So walking. Anything else? What was that? Hiking?
Bike.
Oh, biking. Biking. Yeah, awesome. That's really good too. Elliptical. Yep. That one I will tell you. Like I was like, I don't know, running and elliptical both kill me. So I remember the first time I was ever on an elliptical machine, I was like, oh my goodness, this is hard. So I'm always impressed when people are like on that for 30 minutes. I'm like, how can you not be drenched in sweat? So the type of cardio, and again, I think we tend to do, and I think women actually we are programmed actually to be very good at cardio type exercise. The types of muscles that I think the larger, more efficient types of muscle cells that we have, which are different than men, are biased towards endurance type exercise. And so that's why I think a lot of us are into running and biking and elliptical, and those are really good types of exercise for your cardiovascular system. But we're finding post-menopause, because we want to start to replace some of those things that estrogen and progesterone have done for you historically, is the way. That doesn't mean you stop your longer term type of cardio, but we want to start doing what's called sprint interval training, which is going to be, you guys maybe have heard of like HIIT, which is high intensity interval training. Basically the idea is that you work really hard for a short period of time and then you rest for a short period of time. And there's varying ways to do this and times that you do that for, but probably the easiest one to remember, and the one that I've been starting to practice, is just that you work pretty hard for 30 seconds and kind of more moderate to minimal for 30 seconds. And then you'll do that for about 4 to 6 minutes, and then you take a 4-minute rest. And then you'll do about 2 to 3 cycles of that. A lot of times they'll have you like measure your heart rate for these sorts of things, because you want to be working at a pretty high heart rate level. So close to your highest, but not at your highest. So we'd say you can measure what your heart rate max is. It's 220 minus your age is what your heart rate max is. And so when you're working, if you have a heart rate monitor and want to monitor that, you'd be working not pretty close to that 220 minus your age. But probably what's a little easier for most of us unless you have a way to measure that, is to work along what you'd say, what they'll call the rate of perceived exertion, or an RPE, with 10 being the absolute hardest you can work. And they want you to work for those 30 seconds in about that 8 to 9 out of 10 level. So you're working pretty hard, 30 seconds. Thankfully, it's just 30 seconds, and then you take that, like a little bit of recovery time. So depending on where you're at for your cardio, that might look like walking fast for 30 seconds and then walking slow for 30 seconds. It might look like walking up a hill for 30 seconds and then walking back down for that rest period of 30 seconds. If you're, and I was thinking running up a hill, walking back down. So thinking that you don't necessarily have to have gym equipment to do this type of exercise, which is handy. If you're working in the gym, of course, like, or if you have a bike, definitely think about biking uphill for 30 seconds, back down for 30 seconds. So we're working pretty hard and then lowering that level again. Obviously there's lots of gym equipment. You can work on the elliptical or a stationary bike, treadmill, a rowing machine, lots of various ways to do this type of exercise. But the main thing again is you're working pretty hard and then you rest for about that same amount of time. And what they'll find, and this is what's really encouraging about studies that study the type of cardio that you're doing, they found that women who did this type of exercise lost more abdominal fat and actually visceral fat, so that fat that goes in between your organs, which is associated with more cardiovascular risks. The other thing that they looked at, which is kind of similar, is doing kind of moderate intensity cardio for 40 minutes. When you're doing something along this lines, it's going to be closer to probably 20 minutes. So from a time standpoint, it's kind of nice that you can get it done faster. Okay, so that's our cardio. Oh yeah.
How many times a week?
2 to 3 times a week. Yeah, and I think it depends. So it depends on what other things you're involved in. So if you're already if you're training for a marathon or involved in other sports that require a lot of cardiovascular exercise, you're thinking about, okay, where does that fit in, and then kind of dosing this according to what you're already doing. So that's our cardio section. So our sprint interval training, how does that look again? How long do you work for?
seconds.
30 seconds. Yep. How long do you rest for?
30
or
seconds.
lower, yep, 30 seconds. How many repetitions do you do that for? 4 to 6. Yep. Right now I'm on 4, working up to 6. And then 2 to 3, and then you take a 4-minute, kind of like a 4-minute rest, or basically I'm working kind of slowly, and then you do that again. Yep. Yeah, I'll tell you, it really makes you sweat. But there's some really actually cool research too showing how it helps to mitigate things like stress and anxiety too. So even though you're working really hard, just like that positive benefit of exercise, even though it's a higher intensity type of exercise, can still be helpful for things like managing stress. Okay, we're moving on to our weightlifting. How many of you here do some weightlifting currently? Nice, good. I definitely will tell you, I didn't grow up doing that, and so it is something that can feel a little intimidating to try to get started. So we'll spend a little bit of time going over just some typical ways to do that with good form. I want to teach you how to use your body safely, so that if you were to add load with weights, that you would do it in a way that didn't cause injury. Definitely don't want you going backwards from where we're starting here. Some of these might look like you start with body weight, and then we progress to adding more load. And I'll show you some ways to do that even without weights. So we'll be going through mostly lower extremity exercise today. Before I do that though, I want to stop and we'll talk a little bit about the pelvic floor, because that is the pelvic floor. And so I have my handy model here. And the reason for that is because like I mentioned earlier, your pelvic floor loses muscle mass also. And so knowing how to recruit your muscles, both protectively to prevent something like urinary incontinence, but also to support your pelvic organs, so that as you're doing some of these heavier things, you're not creating pressure that's going to be have a negative impact on your pelvic floor. So while you're still sitting, because soon I'm going to get you standing, I'm just going to quickly show you on the model what we're talking about. So your pelvic floor basically is everything that you're sitting on right now, or if you're sitting on a bike seat, those muscles in between your legs, or if you were to wipe, that's always the term we use. If you wipe, what you're wiping is your pelvic floor. So we've got 3 holes as women here. So we've got our urethral opening, the vaginal opening, and then your anal opening. So that first layer of muscles is gonna close all of those openings. And then that deeper layer of muscles is kind of like a big muscle sling. So your rectum comes right through here and your vaginal canal comes right through here. Or sorry, your rectum comes through here, vaginal canal comes through here. So you'll see it's kind of like this sling of muscles. So when you're contracting this layer, it's going to literally lift everything up. So if you do what's called a Kegel right now, that's kind of our classic pelvic floor muscle contraction. The name, somebody's last name, doesn't really tell you what it is. So if you try contracting those muscles right now, you should feel it close all the openings and kind of lift up away from the chair that you're sitting on. Feeling some of those things? What you might also feel is a little abdominal tightening, and that's normal. If we're trying to isolate the pelvic floor, you shouldn't feel too much buttock contracting. So what that will look like when you're contracting your buttocks is it will actually like push you up and down on the chair versus your pelvic floor will suck up inside of you. Okay, now I'm gonna have you guys stand up. So practice that in sitting. What we're gonna go over is how you brace your core when you're doing weightlifting. Partly because we want to actually use these muscles while we're doing leg muscles also to protect your spine for one, but also to start building strength in this area. So I tell you first about the pelvic floor because as we have you brace your abdomen, it's gonna create pressure. And so your pelvic floor should pull in with that. If it's not naturally doing that, then you'll have to actively pull it in. So now you put your hands on your abdomen here. And when you're bracing, you're just basically going to tense your abdominal muscles so that you feel them kind of harden underneath your fingers. It shouldn't be so tight that you have a hard time talking. That's too much. As you're tightening, see if you can feel your pelvic floor pulling up also. Good. If it's not naturally, go ahead and pull it in a little bit. And again, not so tight that you can't also breathe would be the other thing I would say. You should be able to still breathe so we're not maximally tightening things and restricting your lungs from moving. Good. You can let that relax. Perfect. Feel good for your core brace? We'll practice adding that here in movements in just a moment. So when you're weightlifting, we want to gradually work toward lifting enough weight that you get tired in about 5 to 8 repetitions. That's not necessarily where I'd say to start if you haven't already been weightlifting. What I would do is get comfortable with good weightlifting positions, and when it starts to feel comfortable, add some load, but then when you're feeling pretty good, you can start to add those higher amounts of load. So to start with, we'll talk about a squat. Super practical, right? I'm sure all of you have done a squat before. Every time you get down to a chair, you're doing a squat. And that's part of the reason we love exercises like this is because it's exceptionally practical. So as we start to think about our lives, right? What do we do with our bodies? How can we help improve that, maintain it, and make it even better? So a squat is just gonna be, I'm gonna deck it off so you can see, well, basically we're bending our hips, knees, and ankles, right? And if I do that with a core brace, I'm keeping my spine fairly straight. And so the eventual goal, if you feel comfortable, is maybe even going down to tap the chair that you're sitting on and seeing if you can go that low. If you can't, it's totally fine. Yep, and you could do a modified version where you go and sit down in between and come back up if you need a little bit of a break. Yep, good. Yep. Some things to think about with this is what's happening with your knees. So as you go to squat, you want to make sure that you're not letting those knees pop in on each other. Yeah. Perfect. So one of the things that you could think about here, if I want to increase load that's more than just my body weight, I can think about shifting weight to one side more than the other. So right now, if you have half your weight on each side, it's 50% of your weight. If I want to make that a little bit harder, I can just shift weight to one side and then do that exact same thing again. And you'll just feel, okay, that had to work a little harder. Yep, so try on that motion. Yeah, nice, yep. So you can do this in a shifting way, like I could shift to one side, it's almost like you're skiing, right? Coming down to the other side. While I'm doing this, I'm thinking about keeping my whole foot engaged with the floor. I think we'll see because your hips go back, a lot of people will tend to lose their toes. So keep your toes on the ground while you squat. Yep, perfect. So think about that. Another way to make this a little bit more difficult is we're going to think about using the whole range of the muscle. So if squatting to the chair right now feels like a good challenge, like, okay, that took some work. the goal would be, can I squat all the way down to the ground and come back up? Just thinking about, and that doesn't mean, I'd say if you're not there right now, that's totally okay, but that would be something to work towards, right? So eventually being able to do that, so we're using your muscles to their full range. To do things like that, of course, it may take a little bit of mobility work, right? I might need to get some range of motion in my ankles and my knees and my hips to do something like that, and that's where I'd say, don't start there today if you haven't already been working towards that, but that's somewhere to work up to, right? So I can work on getting deeper toward the ground. So you can think about, why would we do this? Of course, I mean, we pick up things off the ground all the time. You think about your trips to Costco if you shop there, right? You're lifting heavy stuff, right? Getting close to the ground and lifting, 20 pounds of flour. So just think about like, oh, okay, there are very practical reasons that being strong through this motion matters. Okay, if you didn't try it with your core brace and your pelvic floor, try that this time. I'll have you try it just 1 or 2 more times. See if you can tighten your pelvic floor and your core while you do that. Yep. Keep it on. What I'll say is that's kind of complicated. A lot of people, when I start working with them, if I have them try contracting their pelvic floor while they're squatting, it's not super easy. And so just realize that it takes some time to build that coordination to keep your pelvic floor contracted for that full length of a squat. And so even practicing to like a higher surface while you're trying to gain that coordination of keeping your pelvic floor contracted is just a really good way to work on improving your pelvic floor strength. Kegels don't have to live in isolation. As we'll say, you don't have to just do Kegels when you are working on your pelvic floor. You can add them to other things. And I think that's probably the most effective way to help you. Okay, so 1 down squat. Next is a deadlift. And I'll tell you again, like deadlifts kind of sound even dangerous, right? Lifting dead, but maybe it's dead weight. I'm not sure exactly why they call it that. I'm sure there's a reason. But deadlift is different than a squat. So when you're squatting, we're letting our knees come over our toes as I squat down and get my hips deep. When I'm deadlifting, I'm not letting my knees come forward. I'm hinging at my hips, and the emphasis really is on the back of my legs, lifting me back up. So it's on the back of my thighs and my buttocks that are doing the work of getting me back upright. So go ahead and try that real quick. It's kind of interesting. So keeping a pretty flat, low back, coming mostly hips behind your knees, and then pushing back up. Some people, when they start to add weight, which when you hold a weight for this is gonna be here in front of you, coming back up, you should feel, again, the emphasis of that rise coming in the backs of your legs. Yep. Nice.
Do you feel, do your toes kind of come up?
They can, right? Because my weight's going behind me. You're right. And so that's another time I think about kind of pressing my toes down into the ground. So I'm keeping contact with the ground with my whole foot and not letting everything go backwards. Partly because obviously we don't want you to be falling while you're exercising. Not super helpful. Nice. Sometimes I will have people, especially if you start to hold weight in your hands while you do this, it can start to really target your low back, which is not wrong, I'll just say. But if it makes you feel really sore in all the exercises in your low back, I will have people just very gently kind of tuck their tailbone under, because it's going to activate your hamstrings a little bit more when you do an exercise like that. Since we're trying to really emphasize the work of the hamstrings and the buttocks, that's a way to kind of help that. So try now with your core brace and your pelvic floor contracted with that. See if you can. Good. And you can even think there's some other varieties. It's called a Romanian deadlift, where you're not really going to let your knees bend. You're mostly going to hinge at your hips. So you'll start to feel a little bit of stretch in your hamstrings when you come back up. Yeah. And then really use those hamstrings to bring you back up. Yeah. This is actually a really exceptionally practical motion. It might not seem like it to start with, but if you're doing something where you're like standing at the counter and you have to reach and pull something towards you, can't squat into it because I don't have place for my knees to get over my toes. And so we're primarily learning to use our hips and hinge and use our hamstrings to do some of those motions. Really, again, can be really practical. Again, if I want to build strength in the posterior leg, we tend to do a lot more things, I think, for our quadriceps and our buttocks. So finding ways to really target your hamstrings is important. You can do the thing, like if we want to increase load right off the bat, we can shift weight just like we did earlier for your squats. If you try a shifted deadlift, so you can feel more work through that one leg. Good. I can. Yeah, it does. It does feel a little awkward. And I say like, hey, if initially it feels kind of weird, hold on to something while you do it. I'll usually use my foot as like a kickstand if I'm trying to do one leg, just to help with the balance component of it.
Christy, I find too, if you put the foot back a little bit,
Okay.
that helps me balance a little bit.
Okay, yeah. So Trey's saying like if you put your foot behind you a little bit while you do this deadlift, I think it probably does help because it's going to help direct my hips backwards, maybe better than if it's right next to me. It feels a little less awkward. The other thing you can do here is a variation. Your buttocks are rotating muscles, and so I will rotate across my leg and then come back up so I can use that full length of the buttock muscle tissue. So coming across towards the side that I am standing on and then coming back up, just to kind of give a little bit of a different stimulus to the buttocks. It'll feel kind of like a stretch too in some cases, which can, and I'll find for, people who may have a little bit of muscular tension here, if you exercise to that full length of the muscle, sometimes it will help decrease like a spasm or something along those lines. Get warmed up in here. Next is a split squat. And again, we're thinking about practical things, like if I have to lift something from the ground. Basically, it's where I'm gonna, another common name for it is a lunge, right? You guys have probably seen this, like a lunge, where I'm gonna try to keep my body upright between my two legs and then come back up. I can make that a little bit more practical, like I'm gonna lift also, and I'm just gonna start to hinge more from my knees so I can get my hands to the ground. So that motion again, like a split squat where, and again, if balance is a little tricky here, you can totally bring your leg a little bit more out to the side to help. Coming back up. Yep. And this is a little harder than a typical squat because we're using one side more than the other. Yep, you should feel that work in your thighs and your buttocks. Yeah. There are other variations of this where I could put my foot up on something, so I take the help of that leg completely away, and then I'm squatting here, but it still helps a little bit with balance. So it's called a Bulgarian split squat. They tend to give like other country names to some of these things: Romania deadlifts, Bulgarian split squats. Yeah, I was like, wonder what the United States in one is. I'm not sure. And then lastly, and we're talking primarily about lower extremity stuff tonight. Obviously, doing things like bicep curls or push-ups, bench pressing, all those things can be really beneficial as well for stimulating that muscle mass building. Plank will for your core for sure. It could for your arms too, right? If I'm going into, I mean, your arms are working, but it's going to be more core based, which is great. I'd say do things to resist your core. That's really important for sure. I'll say a step up, so stairs are actually really, really effective. And we have a couple steps, I need to go grab them. But using something, again, where it starts to target one leg more than the other, it's gonna increase load on that side. So if I use something that's kind of tall like this, of course it's gonna be hard. It doesn't have to be this tall to be hard. What I'll say is doing something slowly helps a lot. So if I come up slow and then descend really slowly, that's gonna make that exercise a lot harder. So even a normal stair height, which is about 7 inches, is good for that. And what I would say is mix it up so you've got a little variety. Come up sideways sometimes, or control going down, things like that. So various ways to work on a step, which I think can be really effective. So cool things about stairs too, obviously you can make that a lot harder just by going up 2 stairs instead of 1, eventually as that starts to become easy. So just things that you've got in your house maybe, or on your porch, or at the store, wherever you find stairs. And again, really practical, right? Because it's stuff that you're gonna have to do for the rest of your life, most likely, at some point. Now the reason, tugging on your muscles, you guys can sit for a moment if you want. The reason that weightlifting is so important, obviously we want to stimulate muscle mass building. And so instead of doing low rep or high reps and low load, so I might do, instead of doing 20 reps of something, we want to start backing that down to 5 to 8 reps to fatigue. So like I mentioned earlier, if you haven't done a lot of weightlifting, start with lower weights so you can feel really comfortable and make sure that your form is really good, because the last thing you want is getting injured from starting to exercise to try to help yourself. Then as that gets easier, like I mentioned earlier, you can start to add that load, and that could be dumbbells in your hands, that could be weights in a backpack if you're doing something like stairs and you need your hands for balance. A lot of times I'll asymmetrically load as well, so I might hold a weight in one hand and not both, because it's going to change how I load my system. So it just changes the coordination of an exercise. The other thing that happens as those muscles are pulling on your bone, it starts to stimulate bone mass building as well, which is why those heavier loads are really important for building your bone mass, because they're going to tug harder on your bones to try to stimulate the bone building. So we talked about weight. So we talked about our cardio, right? That sprint interval training, which you guys got down, 30 seconds on, 30 seconds off, 4 to 6 reps with a 4-minute rest, 2 to 3 cycles. So our weightlifting, we're going to lift heavy. Lift heavy is the goal eventually. So that, and again, we talked about how can I increase load? I can just increase it by shifting more of my body weight to one side, add weights in my hands, but get your form down well so that you protect your system when you start to do that, because it's going to be really helpful for you. And we had you add your abdominal and pelvic floor brace with those things so that you're stimulating the pelvic floor and the core at the same time. That doesn't mean you shouldn't do, like you mentioned, planks, core-based exercises where I'm really giving more gravity resistance to my core specifically, but that's a way you can add it into some other exercises depending on if you have more limited time, so you can do multiple things at the same time. Last, we're going to talk about what to do for building bone mass a little bit more specifically. Weightlifting is one of them, like we mentioned, but the other thing for that research really supports for building bone mass is actually jumping. What we'll find is that walking alone actually isn't enough stimulus for building your bones. And one of my examples is my mom. She walked very consistently 3 to 5 miles a day for 40 years. Yeah, wow. Very, very consistent, and still had osteoporosis. So it's not enough of a stimulus, especially at this point in our lives. Maybe earlier in your life it is. And so they'll find things like running can be a good stimulus for building bone mass, but we'll find what's even more effective is jumping. And that's because when you do jumping type activities, we give your bones multi-directional stresses, versus running is single directional, typically, unless you're like dodging things.
Can you jump on a rebounder?
You could. I think that'd be a great place to start. Yeah. But eventually you'd want to work toward more regular surface, like if you can. Yeah, that's where I say, like, there's a huge variety. We want a variety of type of jumps. That might be like a squat jump. It might be side to side jumping. It might be jumping jacks or split jumping. So it doesn't have to be like super hard and heavy. Usually what I would recommend initially, especially, and as things feel more comfortable, it's totally fine to change it. But initially we want to add shock absorption. So if I do a squat jump, I start here and then I'm gonna go back into that squat to absorb. But that impact through my system is enough to stimulate your bones. But then, like I'm mentioning, we want to do it jumping or jump rope. That's a great way to jump, because I mean, lots of different things you can do there. We can side to side jump if somebody else is holding the rope for you. This is definitely how I would jump right now. Trey was saying that he jump ropes, and it's actually a little intimidating. I got a jump rope and I was like, oh, I would have to really work at this to get better at it. But it's kind of fun to improve in things like the same you did when you were kids, right? Definitely jumped rope when I was a kid. I don't remember feeling afraid about it. So do it on the grass. To start with. But yeah, I'm actually, let you guys stand up, back up real quick. And here's where we're going to talk about your pelvic floor again, right? This is a common time people have problems with their pelvic floor. Jumping often can cause urinary incontinence. And that's because it's more loading. Again, we're creating a quick stop, and so things want to go down, and that sometimes your muscle system can't hold against that. So I am going to have you guys try a little squat jump just to see how it feels. What I'd recommend, it doesn't have to be a deep squat, you can go short squat, but then when you jump, land back on your toes to heels, and then back down to that squat. And it can be not real big. Good. If you feel like that's gonna cause a problem with urinary incontinence, you can try to gently contract your pelvic floor and see if you can keep it on for a little bit of that. If that feels too intense right now, then try like a forward back jump. This is still gonna give you a good stimulus to your bony system. Or side to side jump. It doesn't even have to be a jumping jack, right? We're still gonna get benefit from side to side jumps. Or, yeah. Yeah. We'll get you warmed up real quick. This can be your sprint interval training. So some really encouraging studies on this showed that even jumping 10 to 20 times a day would start to stimulate bone mass building.
10 to 20 times?
Yes, isn't that cool? So 10 in the morning, 10 in the evening. But we're going to find like what's going to really stimulate it, and the goal would be to work up to like bouts of jumping. So like 45 seconds of jumping eventually. You might start with 20 seconds, or 30 seconds, or 10 seconds, depending on how you feel with that. And then take a break for, so up to 45 seconds, take a break for 15 seconds, do another bout of it, maybe 3 times through. So it doesn't take a ton of time, and if you got kids or grandkids around, I bet they'd love to do it with you. Start it on your rebounder to start with, right, to get your system comfortable with that, if that shock absorption helps. But definitely, if you have an issue like with joints, do it on a more padded surface. That will help with that shock absorption component. Yeah, yep, these sorts of things are pretty easy just to buy on Amazon.
Can you use something for balance?
Absolutely, yeah.
Like a counter?
Yeah, I would
or
say
chair?
if you use a counter or something, just I would avoid like pushing through it a ton.
Right,
Like
yeah.
try to use it, but totally.
Use your
Yeah.
legs.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely, yeah. If you feel that there's a concern for balance, then obviously we'd really like you to be safe while you do this and not fall or something along those lines. It's not helpful.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's our third thing.
Jumping.
Yes, yeah, cool. You guys can have a seat there. So what's our first thing for cardio?
Interval.
Yep, sprint interval training. What's our second thing for weightlifting? Heavy. Heavy, yeah,
Weight
add
training.
load. Yeah, heavy weightlifting, but do it safely. Add your core pelvic floor brace. That third for jumping, we're going to work up to 45 seconds jumping eventually. And again, this is where we say don't start at the 60-mile mark, right? We start back at where your system can do well with, and then you gradually work on increasing that. So work for 45 seconds, 15-second rest. Just a last couple things here. One is diet. So when you're stimulating your body to build muscle mass, you actually need to be eating a lot of protein. And so actually what was recommended, which feels a little daunting, I'll tell you, is that you would eat around 1 gram of protein per body weight, or per pound of body weight. I know, that's significant, right? So it could be like, for me, 160 pounds, right? Or 160 grams of protein, which is a lot. And what I would encourage you with that is, it doesn't mean that you maybe start that tomorrow. Like, well, have a chicken for every meal, which chicken's a good source of protein, right? But start to think about, hey, what maybe could I start replacing with protein, more protein dense food. So maybe for breakfast, instead of cereal or oatmeal or something, you might have like Greek yogurt or cottage cheese, because they're going to have a higher percentage of protein. So you can get 28 grams of protein in 1 cup of cottage cheese. That's a lot. So I was thinking about, yeah, I think it's about 14 grams per cup, or half a cup. Yeah. So same with Greek yogurt, similar thing. So you can get pretty good amounts. So I was thinking about like, hey, where could I start putting this into my diet? Maybe those staples that I go to for some of my meals, I could look into see what might be a little bit more protein rich. So that as I'm starting to stimulate these changes in my body, then I'm also fueling my system to do that well. Yeah.
Something that's helped me is there's apps. So I have a protein tracker app.
Ooh, cool.
And it's super easy.
Okay.
It says you put an egg and it'll bring it up. And
Tell you how much protein's in it.
Yeah.
That's helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you can kind of identify where
Yep.
you're already getting it in your diet. Yeah. I say
And
eggs
it's
were-
really hard to do 120 or 130 grams a day. It's
It
a lot of
is.
food.
It is. Yeah, but you'll find things like cheese or eggs, obviously meat, or like thinking about, hey, if I'm gonna have some sort of like a pasta, maybe think of a quinoa type pasta because it has a higher amount of protein. So just starting to look.
Lentils have high protein.
Yep, lentils. So looking at those things, and they like you to get this from whole foods because you'll get some of those other nutrients like fiber and things along those lines with them, or calcium from your dairy things. Not everybody can have dairy, but those are some of the positive things that can come from more of a whole food form. If you need to supplement some, I do that because sometimes it's hard to, bring chicken with me everywhere I go. So I will use like a protein powder. So finding one that has minimal amounts of ingredients can be helpful. So those are some other ways to look into that. One of the other things I would say is the timing of when you eat, especially when you're exercising, is you need to put gas in the engine, right? So before you go to do something like a sprint interval training, you actually need to put some fuel in your system. So it might be kind of a small snack where it's like, maybe it's half an apple and some peanut butter. I'm getting a little bit of protein, I'm getting a little bit of a carb to really give myself energy to work hard. And so I'm not just breaking down other parts of my body to get the nutrients I need to do that type of a workout. And then they found for women, after you've done something like a weightlifting routine, you actually need to give yourself a pretty good amount of protein about 30 minutes after your workout. So something like 30 to 40 grams. And that's because we start building muscle. We build muscle for a couple hours after you've worked out, and so you need to be fueling your system to do that well. So this is kind of what the research is showing that's specific to women, and men don't have to do it that quickly post-workout. They can wait a couple hours, but for women it's actually important that we do it a little bit sooner. So we have talked about a lot of stuff tonight. We've covered a little bit of like what exactly is menopause, perimenopause, what's happening with your hormones, what are the physiological changes. Obviously you guys know a lot about the negative symptoms of menopause. And then we talked about, hey, what should you be doing to make to really start to affect these changes in your body tonight. So we've already talked through them, but that cardio, that fast cardio, that loaded weightlifting, and then that jumping for bone mass building. So I want you to take a moment and just kind of think about what would happen in the next year, 5 years, 10 years from now if you don't do some of these things. We kind of know the statistics, right?
Quality of life would go down.
Right. So maybe not necessarily a very good outcome. And so what I'm just going to encourage you tonight with information that you learn. It's great to learn things, and I can definitely be guilty of this, so that I learn things and then I don't apply them. And so I just want to encourage you apply these things. So you want to be thinking about maybe what's keeping you from participating in this type of exercise if you're not already doing it. Since you guys, a lot of you are already exercising, which is awesome. But think about what might be limiting you. Think about next, like, what if you do it? Like, where could you be in a year from now if you're consistently working on gaining strength and building your bone mass, and in improving your cardiovascular ability? What about 5 years from now when you're consistent? And think about, hey, what could be different? Maybe that right now is not where I'd like it to be. What could be better in a year from now, or 5 years from now, or 10 years from now? So to say, hey, put this stuff into practice. And like I mentioned, if there's something that's keeping you from being able to participate in this, obviously I talked about the pelvic floor tonight. There's sometimes some troublesome symptoms that can come up when you start to exercise in a more loaded way, like we talked about. Or if you have joint pain or tendon pain, something that's keeping you from exercising, it's going to tell you, don't just do nothing about it, address it. And that's something that we would love to help you with if it's keeping you, or if you just want a little bit more direction in applying these things to your workout routine. So one of the ways we like to do, the things we like to do during a workshop is just offer a promotion for an evaluation, which is it's a 90-minute visit with me or Trey, where we'll take a look at your system and then try to get you started with things to work towards your strength, and or working on plyometrics for jumping, things along those lines that perhaps may be a little bit difficult to participate in for some reason, or just to clarify, like, what's the route I should go to start adding this in. So we offer those for $99, so that's about half price, which is great. So if any of you are interested in that, please contact us. We would love to help you in that area. Any last questions? Yeah.
I did get a vibration.
Okay.
Plate or whatever.
Yeah.
It came today.
Okay, cool. cool.
You said your mom had one?
Yes.
And how do you use that? How long?
She uses it, again, like I told you, my mom has done like all the research for everything that she could be doing. So from diet, we talked about we can eat prunes, it's supposed to help stimulate bone mass building, which is kind of interesting. But she stands on her vibration plate for about 10 minutes a day. So, and some people I've heard they'll exercise on it.
Yeah.
Do very
I do 30
vibration.
minutes a
You do
day.
30 minutes, okay.
There's 3 programs and I do each program and they're 10 minutes each.
Okay, yep,
Yeah.
so.
And you can do squats, you can do things, you can have weights, and
Yeah.
it's pretty good.
What is that?
It's a plate that you stand on that vibrates at a certain frequency, and there's some research that supports that frequency of vibration will stimulate bone mass building.
And
So.
lymphatic drainage is really
Oh,
good.
and lymphatic, yeah,
Because
some
it
other
goes back
positive
and forth,
changes.
up and down like thousands, tens of thousands of,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, and I think there's like a certain way it vibrates,
Yeah.
whether it's like side
It's
to side versus up and down.
phenomenal. I
Yep.
love mine.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
have to stand there.
Yep, or exercise.
Or exercise.
Or
just jump.
You can jump on, I don't know, sorry. I stood on the vibration plate and I was like, oh wow, I feel
Yeah.
like it's like chattering my whole system. I was like, I feel like I like need to tighten up to like, I'm like, I'm not sure how I feel about this.
Yeah.
Definitely was an experience. So, yeah, which can be helpful. Like
There's
there's
one at the Valley, I think. Is there one here?
I don't think we have one here, but yeah, I hear people using the one in the Valley. I haven't come to stand on it, but have you used it there?
I haven't.
Okay.
I might now.
Okay, yeah.
Give it a go.
Yeah, go stand on it for 10 minutes. Yeah, I think a lot of people use it for like lymph drainage, but I'm not sure if it just like helps warm up your tissues also, just like prior to workout. I know one lady does it before going to yoga, so I don't think she uses it for 10 minutes though. I don't hear it going for that long. So yeah. Yep.
It's outside your door, right? Like
It's
down
a
by
little
the
bit.
racquetball court?
It's right across from the one racquetball court that's left at Central Park. Yes. Yeah, right before the weight room. Yep, exactly. Yeah. Any other questions? I can.
So when you were talking about getting extra protein after lifting weights, is it primarily just then rather than like after cardio?
I think
or
if you're
after
gonna,
jumping?
so typically when I've done that sprint interval training, I think you could do it in isolation. And I think it's a similar thing because we're stimulating the fast twitch muscles. That speed at which you're working to get your heart rate up is going to stimulate the muscles that actually that build the muscle mass versus the endurance type muscles. And so I do think it's another time that's important to get that protein amount afterwards. Yep. And I will get back to you on that to know for sure. I just know that they definitely want you to do that after you've done something that's stimulating muscle building.
Okay,
So.
so not jumping necessarily.
Not necessarily with jumping. I would say just because we're doing it maybe shorter bouts. Yeah, say every day jump before breakfast and then you can have your protein, right? Or whatever. Yeah. Any other questions? Good.
Oh,
Are good?
Is
Yeah.
cortisol a hormone?
Cortisol is a hormone. Yep. It's a stress hormone.
Okay.
So again, it has a cycle in our bodies also.
Yeah.
So it's usually higher in the morning when you need to get up and go. Yep. So yep. And they'll find for some people think that your cortisol levels can be elevated too much. Yep. So that's kind of it's a stress hormone. Yeah.
What about wearing weight vests when you're walking?
Yeah.
Is
Yeah.
that good?
Yeah. I'd say partly again you're loading your system more.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's as much of a stimulus as like running would be, just because we're thinking about the loads that go through your joints when you're running, is like 3 times your body weight. I don't think you would wear a vest that could replicate that amount of load, but I think it's still helpful, right? So think about when you're doing some cardiovascular exercise. If I load my system, it's going to make my system have to work harder. So I'd say I don't think
Jump
it's.
at the same time.
Yeah, there you go. Jump and wear your loaded vest.
There you go. There you go.
That rucking or whatever they'll call it, the loaded vest or the backpack or yeah. So I think that there's.
Just got 40 pounds.
Oh wow. Okay, so 40 pounds. That's a lot. A lot of them I see are like 10 pounds.
Yeah, mine's 10.
So I'd say 40 pounds. Wow, that will probably add a good amount. Yeah. What I would say is it's a great tool for doing weightlifting, right? Put your vest on while you do like a step up or while I do squats, because it's a good way to add load without having to hold it in your hands necessarily. Yeah. Yep. So it can be really great for that. Yeah.
What about ankle weights?
Yeah. Again, like if we're with ankle weights, like if you're gonna do something like jumping, it's gonna add resistance. A lot of times with something like unless you're jumping, or moving your legs like in an open plane like this, an ankle weight isn't gonna have a lot of effect probably at your ankles, like if I'm doing squats. But depending on how heavy they are, if you're holding them in your hands, that may load the system a little bit more if we have to load up a little bit higher than at your ankles because it's close to the ground.
Like
that may
if
not
you're
load.
walking or.
Oh, when you're walking. Yeah, it's gonna add resistance, right? It's gonna make your legs have to work harder. As far as the load when you're landing, it's probably gonna add some, like, we're gonna hit the ground maybe a little bit harder. I don't know what the evidence would show regarding
Yeah.
that. It's hard to say. Like, I haven't read studies that recommend something along those lines, but that doesn't mean it's not gonna help, so. Yeah. Any other? Good? Yeah, great. Well, if you have other questions, feel free to come up. I'm happy to talk with you about these things. Yeah, so I think there's a lot of ways